My name is Everett Wilson, 68 years old, and just 6 months ago I lost Martha, my wife of 45 years. What I never expected was that she left me $31 million, or that my own son would try to take it all. The betrayal cut deeper than the grief, but who would have thought that a simple cup of coffee and the split-second decision to switch it would save my life and reveal the truth? If you have ever faced family betrayal over money, you know how it tears at your soul. Before I share my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real-life experiences. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in St. Paul, Minnesota. My father worked at the local paper mill, while my mother taught at the elementary school down the street. We never had much, but my parents made sure we never felt like we were missing out on anything important. They taught me the value of hard work, integrity, and family loyalty. Values I thought I had successfully passed down to my own children. I met Martha during my sophomore year at the University of Minnesota. She was studying business while I was pursuing engineering. We literally bumped into each other at the campus library, sending her carefully organized finance textbooks tumbling to the floor. As I helped her gather them, I was struck by her warm brown eyes and the quiet confidence she carried. That moment changed my life forever, though I had no idea just how much at the time. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony with just our families and a few close friends. Martha had just graduated with honors, and I still had a year left in my program. We moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment near campus that cost $90 a month, which felt astronomical on our tight budget. Martha found work as an assistant at a local investment firm while I finished my degree, working evenings at a hardware store to make ends meet. Those early years were tough but beautiful in their simplicity. We counted pennies, clipped coupons, and celebrated small victories like being able to afford a proper dinner at a restaurant at the end of each month. Martha kept meticulous track of our finances in a small red ledger, balancing our checkbook to the penny. I now realize this was the beginning of her financial acumen, though at the time I just appreciated her careful management of our limited resources. After I graduated, I landed a job at an engineering firm specializing in bridge design. The salary seemed enormous compared to our student budgets. We upgraded to a small 2-bedroom house in the suburbs with a postage stamp yard, but it felt like a mansion to us. Within 3 years, we welcomed our son, Andrew, and 4 years after that, our daughter Sarah joined our family. Throughout these years, Martha continued working at the investment firm, steadily advancing from assistant to advisor. She had a natural talent for numbers and an intuitive understanding of market trends. Clients requested her by name, impressed with her conservative but effective investment strategies. While I watched the children on weekends, she would often attend investment seminars, always seeking to expand her knowledge. Despite her growing success, Martha maintained our modest lifestyle. We upgraded to a slightly larger home when the children were in elementary school, but nothing extravagant. We drove practical cars, took reasonable vacations, and put money aside for the kids' college funds. Martha always insisted on living well below our means, a philosophy I happily agreed with. We both came from humble beginnings and saw no reason to flaunt whatever success we achieved. What I never fully realized was that while maintaining our middle-class lifestyle, Martha was quietly building an investment empire. She managed our joint accounts with the same practical approach she always had, but apparently had separate investments I knew little about. Not because she was secretive, but because finances were her domain, and I trusted her completely. When I would ask how our investments were doing, she would simply smile and say, "Everything is on track, Everett. We will be comfortable in retirement." Andrew grew into an ambitious young man who seemed determined to achieve wealth and status from an early age. He excelled academically and went on to earn an MBA from an elite university. He married Bethany, a beautiful woman from a wealthy family who shared his aspirations for a luxurious lifestyle. They settled in a sprawling house in an exclusive neighborhood and were always driving the newest luxury vehicles. I sometimes wondered how they afforded it all on their incomes, but assumed Bethany family money played a role. Sarah, our daughter, took after Martha in her thoughtfulness, but chose a very different path. After college, she joined the Peace Corps, and later took a position with an international aid organization. Her work took her around the world, from South America to Southeast Asia. While we missed having her nearby, we admired her compassionate spirit and dedication to helping others. She lived simply and seemed genuinely fulfilled by her work. Our family gatherings were always warm, if increasingly infrequent as the children built their own lives. Andrew and Bethany would regale us with stories of networking events and business opportunities, while Sarah would share moving experiences from her humanitarian work during her brief visits home. Martha and I would exchange glances across the table, quietly proud of the adults our children had become, despite their vastly different approaches to life. Last year, Martha was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came late, as it often does with this cruel disease. We were told she had perhaps 6 months. True to her practical nature, Martha faced the news with remarkable grace. She put her affairs in order, spent quality time with family and friends, and made me promise not to let grief consume me after she was gone. Those final months were precious beyond words. We revisited favorite places from our life together, looked through old photo albums, and had deep conversations about our journey. Martha seemed at peace, concerned only that I would be all right without her. I assured her I would find a way forward, though I could not imagine life without her steady presence beside me. Martha passed peacefully in her sleep one spring morning, with me holding her hand. Andrew and Bethany flew in immediately, and Sarah made it home from Myanmar just in time for the funeral. The service was beautiful, with far more people attending than I expected. Clients from Martha's firm spoke of her integrity and wisdom. Neighbors recalled her quiet generosity. Friends shared stories that made us laugh through our tears. In those early days of grief, Andrew and Bethany were surprisingly attentive. They stayed in our guest room, managed funeral arrangements, and helped sort through condolence messages. Andrew even suggested I meet with Martha's financial advisor to make sure everything is in order. I agreed it would be sensible, but wanted to wait until the initial shock of loss had subsided. 2 weeks after the funeral, Martha's longtime lawyer, Thomas Harrington, called to schedule the reading of the will. He suggested we meet at his downtown office the following Monday. I invited Andrew and Bethany to join me, and we called Sarah, who was still in town. Thomas mentioned it was important that all immediate family members be present, which seemed standard procedure at the time. Little did I know that Monday morning would bring a revelation that would shatter our family harmony and reveal sides of my children I never could have imagined existed. The modest, loving life Martha and I had built was about to be tested in ways I could never have foreseen, all because of numbers in a bank account and the true character they would expose. The morning of the will reading dawned gray and drizzly, matching my somber mood. I dressed carefully in the navy suit Martha had always liked, feeling her absence acutely as I fumbled with my tie, something she had always helped me with. Andrew and Bethany picked me up in their sleek black SUV, both dressed impeccably in designer morning attire. Sarah met us at the lawyer's office, her simple black dress a stark contrast to Bethany's tailored ensemble. Thomas Harrington welcomed us into a conference room with mahogany furniture and leather chairs that spoke of old money and discretion. Family photos lined his desk, a humanizing touch in such a formal setting. He offered his condolences again before retrieving a folder from his briefcase. "Before I begin," Thomas said, adjusting his reading glasses, "I want to say that Martha was not only a valued client but a dear friend. She was extraordinary in many ways, some of which will become apparent today." I nodded, throat tight with emotion. Andrew leaned forward slightly, while Sarah reached over to squeeze my hand. "As is customary, I will begin with the formal aspects of the last will and testament," Thomas continued, opening the folder. What followed was standard legal language, the formal identification of Martha as the testator, sound of mind, and so forth. I half listened, having expected a straightforward distribution of our modest assets. The house worth about $400,000, retirement accounts we had built over decades, some stock investments Martha had mentioned were doing well, perhaps $1 million in total, which seemed more than adequate for my remaining years. Thomas cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. Now, to the distribution of assets. To her beloved husband, Everett James Wilson, Martha leaves her entire estate, valued at approximately $31 million, including all real estate holdings, investment portfolios, business interests, and personal property. The room fell silent. I stared at Thomas, certain I had misheard. "I am sorry," I interrupted. "Did you say $31 million? Thomas smiled gently. "Yes, Everett. $31,472,618.14, to be precise, as of last month's accounting." I felt the blood drain from my face. Beside me, Andrew made a strange, choking sound. Bethany's eyes widened to an almost comical degree. Sarah simply looked stunned. "There must be some mistake," I managed to say. "Martha and I lived comfortably, but we were never wealthy." Thomas shook his head. "There is no mistake. Martha was exceptionally talented at identifying investment opportunities. Over the decades, she built a diverse portfolio that performed extraordinarily well. She also owned majority stakes in 3 commercial real estate developments and held minority interests in several successful startups." He passed me a bound portfolio detailing the assets, page after page of investments, properties, and business interests I had never known about. While I had been designing bridges, Martha had been quietly building an empire. Why would she keep this from me? I asked, more to myself than anyone else. Thomas seemed prepared for this question. Martha explained her reasons in a letter. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Martha's familiar handwriting. "She asked me to give you this privately, but given the circumstances, perhaps now is appropriate." With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and began to read. "My dearest Everett, if you are reading this, I have left you to navigate this world alone, for which I am deeply sorry. By now you will have learned about our financial situation, which I know will come as a shock. Please forgive my discretion over the years. I never meant to deceive you, but I found that wealth changes how people see you and treat you. I cherished our simple, authentic life and wanted to protect that for as long as possible. The money came gradually through careful investments. Each time I considered telling you, I worried it might change us somehow. You loved your work, and we were happy with our life exactly as it was. Why disrupt that? So I continued investing, with the intention that one day we would use this money to do tremendous good in the world. Now that legacy falls to you alone. Use it wisely, my love. Help Sarah expand her humanitarian work. Ensure Andrew understands that wealth should enable generosity, not define self-worth. Most importantly, find new purpose and joy in your remaining years. All my love. Always, Martha." I looked up from the letter with tears streaming down my face. My Martha, so much more complex than I had ever realized, yet exactly the person I had always known. Practical, forward-thinking, and deeply protective of what mattered most. While I processed this revelation, I became aware of an intense whispered conversation between Andrew and Bethany. Their heads were close together, expressions shifting rapidly between shock, disbelief, and something that looked unsettlingly like calculation. "There are additional specific provisions," Thomas continued, seemingly oblivious to the dramatic shift in the room atmosphere. "Martha established a charitable foundation to be directed by Everett, with an initial endowment of $5 million. She also left personal messages and small mementos to various friends and extended family." He turned to a specific page. "To her son Andrew and his wife Bethany, Martha leaves her collection of first edition financial texts, and this personal note." He handed Andrew an envelope similar to mine. Andrew took it with a slight frown, clearly expecting something more substantial. He opened it and read silently, his expression darkening. "And to her daughter Sarah," Thomas continued. "Martha leaves her grandmother engagement ring and personal jewelry collection, along with this note." Sarah accepted her envelope with trembling hands. Thomas closed the folder. "As executor of the estate, I will assist with the transfer of assets, which should be relatively straightforward, as Martha had already positioned most investments in joint accounts. The house and vehicles are already in both your names, Everett. There will be some paperwork, but essentially, you have immediate access to everything." The meeting concluded with Thomas providing a timeline for settling the estate and answering initial questions. Throughout, I felt disconnected from reality, as if watching the scene from outside my body. $31 million. My modest, practical Martha had been a secret millionaire. The drive home was tense with unspoken thoughts. Andrew drove aggressively, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Bethany kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror with an expression I could not quite decipher. Sarah had returned to her hotel, promising to come by for dinner. "So, Dad," Andrew finally broke the silence as we turned onto my street. "What are you going to do with all that money?" The question seemed premature, considering I had learned about the money less than an hour ago. "I honestly have not had time to think about it, Andrew. This is all very overwhelming." Of course," he said quickly. "I just meant, that is a lot to manage at your age. Mom clearly had financial skills that, well, you have other strengths. What your father means," Bethany interjected smoothly, "is that we are here to help. Financial management is literally Andrew's profession. It would make sense for him to assist, given the circumstances." I nodded noncommittally, unsettled by their immediate focus on the money rather than the loss of Martha or the revelation of her secret financial life. When we arrived home, I begged off further conversation, claiming I needed to lie down. In truth, I needed space to process everything without their hovering presence. Alone in the bedroom I had shared with Martha for decades, I reread her letter several times. Each reading brought fresh tears but also deeper understanding. Martha had not kept her financial success secret out of distrust, but to preserve the authentic life we cherished. She had seen how wealth changed people, perhaps including our own son, and had made a choice to protect our happiness. That evening, Sarah called from her hotel. Unlike Andrew, her first concern was my emotional state. "Dad, are you okay?" That was quite a bombshell Thomas dropped on us. "I am still processing it all," I admitted. "I keep thinking about all those investment seminars and late nights she spent working. I was proud of her dedication, but I never imagined this outcome." "Mom was always full of surprises," Sarah said with affection in her voice. "I am glad she left you well provided for. You deserve every comfort after all these years of hard work. The money is overwhelming, but it's her trust in me that means the most," I confessed. "She believed I would use it wisely." "And you will," Sarah said confidently. "Just take your time making any decisions. There is no rush." After we hung up, I contrasted Sarah's reaction with Andrew's immediate questions about what I planned to do with the money. The difference was striking and troubling. I tried to give Andrew the benefit of the doubt, wondering if perhaps his financial background simply made him think in those terms first. That night, lying in our bed alone, I spoke aloud to Martha, as I often did since her passing. $31 million, Martha? Really? All these years you were building this nest egg while we clipped coupons for the weekly grocery shopping." I laughed softly, then sobered. "I will do right by your trust in me, my love. I promise." As I drifted off to sleep, I resolved to honor Martha's wishes thoughtfully and deliberately. What I did not yet realize was how fiercely I would have to defend that resolve against those who felt entitled to decide for me, or how soon the battle would begin. The change in Andrew and Bethany behavior was subtle at first. The day after the will reading, they arrived at my house unannounced, bringing breakfast pastries and coffee. "Andrew had taken the week off work to help you figure things out, Dad." I appreciated the gesture but found their sudden availability curious, given how busy they normally claimed to be. Over breakfast, Andrew casually mentioned a financial advisor friend who specialized in high-net-worth individuals. He could come by tomorrow to discuss options, Andrew suggested, as if this were already decided. "You will need someone to manage the portfolio properly. I have only known about this money for 24 hours, I reminded him. "I am not making any decisions yet." "But the markets wait for no one, Dad," Andrew persisted. "Every day without proper management is potentially money lost." "Martha accounts seem to have done extraordinarily well for decades," I pointed out. "I doubt they will collapse if I take a few weeks to understand what I have inherited." Bethany jumped in with a softer approach. "We are just concerned about you, Everett. This is a lot to handle while you are grieving." Their concern might have seemed more genuine if they were not simultaneously eyeing the portfolio details I had left on the coffee table. When I stepped out to use the bathroom, I returned to find Andrew quickly replacing the documents, pretending he had not been examining them. The pattern continued over the following days. Andrew and Bethany appeared each morning with some new financial article about inheritance management or the name of another essential financial professional I needed to consult. They began casually dropping references to their own financial challenges, business opportunities they could not pursue, and the extortionate interest rate on their mortgage. A week after the will reading, I received a call from Martha, longtime financial advisor, Eleanor Reynolds. She requested a meeting, explaining that Martha had instructed her to contact me directly rather than through Andrew. Eleanor was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, with a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of Martha. She arrived carrying a laptop and several folders, which she organized neatly on my dining room table. "First, let me say how much I respected Martha," she began. "We worked together for over 30 years, and her instincts were unparalleled. I had no idea the extent of her investments," I admitted. Eleanor nodded understandingly. Martha was intensely private about her success, even within the firm. Only a handful of people knew the full scope of her portfolio. She opened her laptop. "Martha left very specific instructions about your financial transition. She anticipated your discomfort and prepared accordingly." Over the next 2 hours, Eleanor walked me through Martha investment philosophy, the structure of our holdings, and the management systems already in place. Most importantly, she showed me documentation of Martha's explicit wishes regarding the inheritance. "She was adamant that you have complete control," Eleanor emphasized. "She established a team of professionals who report directly to you, and she left detailed guidelines reflecting your shared values." As we finished, Eleanor lowered her voice. "Martha also left me a personal note with some concerns. She worried that Andrew might try to influence your financial decisions. She asked me to remind you that while Andrew has financial training, his investment approach is fundamentally different from hers. More aggressive, less patient. I appreciated Martha's foresight but felt uncomfortable with the implication about our son. Andrew was just trying to help," I said, though with less conviction than I would have had a week earlier. Eleanor gave me a measured look. "Of course. Just remember that you have an entire team of professionals already in place, hand-picked by Martha based on decades of working relationships. You do not need to make any changes unless you want to." When Andrew and Bethany discovered I had met with Eleanor without them, their displeasure was palpable. Andrew paced the living room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Dad, these people worked for Mom. They do not necessarily have your best interests at heart. They are protecting their positions. Your mother trusted them implicitly," I countered. "She left detailed instructions about continuing to work with them." "Mom was from a different generation," Andrew argued. "The financial world has evolved. You need fresh perspectives." The next morning, Andrew arrived with 2 men in expensive suits, introducing them as the financial team I was telling you about. I had no recollection of agreeing to such a meeting, and said as much. "It is just an informal consultation," Andrew insisted. "No commitments." Reluctantly, I allowed them to present their proposals. Their sleek presentation was filled with complicated charts and investment jargon, all building toward their recommendation that I transfer management of my entire portfolio to their firm, with Andrew serving as the family liaison. When they finished, I thanked them for their time but explained I was not making any immediate changes to Martha arrangements. The disappointment on all 3 faces was unmistakable. After the men left, Andrew confronted me directly. "Dad, I do not understand why you are being so stubborn about this. I am trying to protect your interests." "I appreciate that, son. But these are major decisions that cannot be rushed." "That is just it, Dad," Andrew said, his voice rising. "You are too old to handle this kind of money. You have no experience with wealth management. You are going to be taken advantage of." His words struck like a physical blow. Too old? I was only 68, still sharp and capable. I had managed complex engineering projects for decades, supervised teams of professionals, and helped design structures that would outlast us all. Yet my son saw only an elderly man incapable of handling his own affairs. Before I could respond, Bethany entered with a tearful story about their struggling business and the dream home they might lose if their current cash flow issues continued. The performance felt choreographed, their tag team approach designed to wear down my resistance. That evening, I called Sarah to share what had happened. Her response was immediate and firm. "Dad, this is exactly what Mom worried about. Andrew has always been fixated on appearances and status. Do not let him pressure you into anything. He is still my son," I said wearily. "I want to believe his intentions are good. I am sure part of him does want to help," Sarah acknowledged. "But $31 million has a way of complicating motivations. Just promise me you will not sign anything without independent advice." I promised, increasingly uneasy about the dynamics developing in my own home. Martha had left me financially secure beyond my wildest imagination. Yet instead of bringing peace, the inheritance was creating conflict I had never anticipated. And Andrew's subtle suggestion that I was mentally incompetent to manage my own affairs had planted a seed of worry about just how far he might go to gain control of his mother's fortune. As weeks passed, I began noticing a disturbing pattern. Extended family members and longtime friends called with concerns about my well-being, all using suspiciously similar language. My brother-in-law mentioned hearing I was struggling with decisions. A cousin inquired whether I was managing okay on my own. My neighbor of 20 years asked outright if the stress of handling such a large estate was affecting my health. When I mentioned these calls to Sarah during our weekly video chat, her expression hardened. "Dad, Andrew is spreading rumors. He is trying to create a narrative that you are not coping well." "Surely he would not go that far," I protested, though with less conviction than before. Sarah sighed. "I have heard it too. My cousin Jackie called last week, asking if it was true you were showing signs of cognitive decline." Those were her exact words. "Dad, cognitive decline." The realization that Andrew might be actively undermining me sent a chill through my body. This went beyond simple disagreement about financial management. This was a deliberate attempt to question my competence. My suspicions were confirmed when I received a call from our family doctor, explaining that Andrew had contacted him with concerns about potential dementia symptoms he had supposedly observed. Dr. Miller, who had known me for decades, seemed embarrassed by the conversation. "I explained to Andrew that I had seen you for your annual physical just 2 months ago and found you to be in excellent cognitive health," Dr. Miller assured me, "but he was quite insistent that I should be monitoring you more closely." I thanked Dr. Miller for his candor and hung up, shaken by this escalation. Andrew was not just pressuring me directly, he was attempting to build a case for my incompetence among everyone who knew me. The situation worsened when Andrew and Bethany announced they were temporarily moving into the guest house on my property to provide support during this difficult transition. What they meant became clear as they inserted themselves into every aspect of my daily life, monitoring my conversations, scrutinizing my mail, and questioning every decision, no matter how minor. One afternoon, I returned from a walk to find Bethany hastily replacing papers in my home office. She claimed to be tidying up, but the guilty flush on her face told a different story. Later, I discovered my estate planning documents had been moved from their folder, and recent bank statements were missing entirely. The final straw came during a dinner party Andrew and Bethany organized at my home, ostensibly to lift my spirits. They invited several couples from their social circle, none of whom I knew well, along with 2 of my oldest friends and their wives. Throughout the evening, Andrew repeatedly drew attention to minor memory lapses or verbal stumbles, turning ordinary senior moments into public spectacles. "Dad forgot where he put his reading glasses again," he announced loudly after I patted my pockets. "Third time today, right, Dad?" Later, when I momentarily blanked on the name of a restaurant, Andrew exchanged meaningful glances with Bethany. The memory issues seemed to be getting more frequent. He stage whispered to one of the guests, just loudly enough for me to hear. By dessert, I felt like a specimen under examination, with every word and gesture scrutinized for signs of deterioration. My old friends looked increasingly uncomfortable, clearly seeing through the charade but unsure how to intervene. After the guests departed, I confronted Andrew directly. "I know what you are doing, and it stops now. You are not moving my papers, not speaking to my doctor behind my back, and certainly not holding public exhibitions of supposed cognitive decline." Andrew dropped the solicitous act immediately. "Dad, Be realistic. You are almost 70. Mom always handled the finances. How do you expect to manage millions when you can barely remember where you put your car keys? Those are two very different things. As you well know, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. I may occasionally misplace my glasses, but my mind is sound. Martha trusted me with this responsibility, and I intend to honor that trust. Mom made a mistake, Andrew said coldly. She was sentimental. I am being practical. This amount of money requires professional management, which it has, I reminded him. Through the team your mother assembled over decades. The argument escalated until Andrew stormed out, Bethany trailing behind with a parting shot about my stubbornness being another sign of my declining faculties. The next day, I received an unexpected visitor. Margaret Taylor had been Martha's best friend since college, though they had seen each other less frequently in recent years after Margaret moved to Arizona. She had flown back for the funeral but departed before the will reading. Over tea in my kitchen, Margaret revealed something that made the puzzle pieces fall into place. Martha was concerned about Andrew and Bethany's financial situation, she confided. She discovered they were deeply in debt despite their apparent wealth. The house, the cars, the vacations, all financed through massive loans. Martha worried they were counting on an inheritance to bail them out. Why would they live so far beyond their means? I wondered aloud. Margaret shook her head sadly. Martha believed Bethany family money was mostly gone, spent maintaining appearances, and Andrew business ventures have not been as successful as he claims. They have been keeping up a facade that requires constant cash infusions. This revelation explained Andrew's increasingly desperate attempts to gain control of Martha's estate. It was not just greed but financial necessity driving his behavior. Armed with this understanding, I met with Thomas Harrington to discuss protecting myself legally. He recommended documenting Andrew's behavior, securing my important papers in a safe deposit box, and considering a restraining order if the situation continued to escalate. Martha anticipated potential conflict, Thomas admitted. She considered establishing a trust with controls, but ultimately decided to give you full authority, trusting your judgment. That evening, I asked Andrew and Bethany to move out of the guest house, explaining that I needed space to grieve and adjust to my new circumstances. Their reaction was explosive. "You cannot handle living alone," Andrew shouted. "This proves you are not thinking clearly. You are making a huge mistake," Bethany added tearfully. "We are only trying to protect you from people who want to take advantage of you." The irony of her statement might have been amusing under different circumstances. As it was, I simply repeated my request that they vacate the guest house by the end of the week. Their expressions as they left made it clear this battle was far from over. That night, I called Sarah and asked her to come home as soon as she could arrange it. I sensed the conflict was approaching a breaking point, and I wanted family I could trust by my side for what might come next. "I will be on the next flight," Sarah promised. "And Dad, change the locks." Today, I followed her advice, calling a locksmith that afternoon. As he worked, I could not help but reflect on how quickly my life had changed. 2 months ago, I had been a grieving widower finding my way forward after losing my life partner. Now I was changing locks to keep out my own son, protecting myself from someone I had once carried on my shoulders and taught to ride a bicycle. The money that Martha had intended as security for my future had instead become a threat to my autonomy and safety. I had no idea how prescient that fear would prove to be, or how a simple breakfast invitation would reveal the true depths of my son's desperation. 3 days after changing the locks, I received a text message from Andrew that struck a conciliatory tone. "Dad, we got off on the wrong foot. Bethany and I feel terrible about our argument. Would you join us for breakfast tomorrow? We want to make things right." Despite my wariness, I agreed. They were still my family, and I wanted to believe reconciliation was possible. We arranged to meet at their house at 9 the next morning. When I arrived, I was surprised to see Bethany's mother, Judith, was also present. A stylish woman in her early 70s, Judith had always been cordial, though somewhat distant at family gatherings. Her presence lent the breakfast an air of formality that seemed at odds with a simple reconciliation. "Mom wanted to help smooth things over," Bethany explained, ushering me into their expansive dining room. Family is so important, especially after a loss. The table was elaborately set with fine china and fresh flowers, an excessive display for breakfast. Andrew greeted me with a hearty handshake that felt rehearsed, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Dad, I want to apologize for overstepping," he said as we took our seats. "Grief affects us all differently, and I should have been more sensitive to your need for independence." His words were perfect, but his delivery felt hollow, like an actor reciting lines. Bethany busied herself in the kitchen while Judith engaged me in small talk about her garden club and upcoming travel plans. "Bethany makes an amazing quiche," Judith commented, "and wait until you taste her coffee. She orders these special beans from Colombia." On cue, Bethany emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of coffee cups. "I made your coffee just how you like it, Everett," she said, carefully placing a blue ceramic mug in front of me. "A splash of cream, no sugar." I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she set down the remaining cups. She served Judith next, placing a similar white mug before her mother, then distributed cups to Andrew and herself before returning to the kitchen for the food. As I reached for my coffee, I detected an unusual odor, subtle but distinct beneath the rich coffee aroma. Something medicinal, perhaps, or chemical. I paused, my hand hovering over the cup, recalling something Martha had once said during a mystery novel discussion group we had attended. "Always notice when something seems off, no matter how small. Your subconscious often recognizes danger before your conscious mind can name it." Bethany returned with a platter of quiche, her eyes flicking nervously to my untouched coffee. "Is something wrong with your coffee, Everett? I can make a fresh cup." No. It smells wonderful," I assured her, though I did not reach for it. "I am just letting it cool a bit." As Bethany served the quiche, I made a split-second decision. When she turned to serve her mother, I smoothly switched my blue mug with Judith's white one. The action was quick and silent, masked by the clatter of plates and serving utensils. Andrew launched into an elaborate story about a client, gesturing expansively, drawing all attention to himself. I noted how his gaze repeatedly darted to my coffee cup, now in front of his mother-in-law, his expression a mixture of anticipation and tension. Judith lifted her cup, my original cup, and took a generous sip. "Delicious as always, Bethany," she commented, taking another drink. I lifted my cup, formerly hers, and pretended to sip, careful to let none of the liquid pass my lips. "Indeed, excellent coffee," I agreed. The conversation continued, Andrew growing more animated as he described plans for expanding his business. "With the right investment, we could double our client base within 6 months, he explained, looking at me meaningfully. Beside him, Judith set down her fork abruptly. "Is it warm in here?" she asked, tugging at her collar. Her words were slightly slurred. "The temperature is perfect, Mom," Bethany replied, barely glancing at her mother. A few minutes later, Judith's speech became more noticeably impaired. "I feel strange," she mumbled, her eyes struggling to focus. She attempted to stand, but swayed dangerously, gripping the edge of the table. "Mother, are you all right?" Bethany finally seemed to notice something was wrong, her feigned concern belied by the flash of panic as she looked from her mother to my still full coffee cup. "I think I might." Judith did not finish her sentence before collapsing sideways out of her chair. "Oh my God," Andrew shouted, rushing to Judith's side. "What happened? Is she having a stroke?" "Call an ambulance," I commanded, kneeling beside the unconscious woman. Her breathing was shallow but steady, her pulse rapid. "Now, Andrew." As Andrew fumbled with his phone, Bethany stood frozen, her face a mask of horror, not at her mother's condition, but at the realization of what had occurred. Our eyes met across the table, and in that moment, we both knew that I knew exactly what they had attempted. The paramedics arrived within minutes, efficiently transferring Judith to a stretcher while asking rapid-fire questions about her medical history and what had happened. "She just collapsed during breakfast," Andrew explained, the picture of concerned son-in-law. No warning signs. "She was drinking coffee when she began slurring her words," I added pointedly. "That cup right there." I indicated the blue mug that had originally been placed in front of me. The lead paramedic nodded. We will take the cup for testing. Could be relevant. Bethany's face went ashen. That is not necessary. It is just coffee. Better safe than sorry, ma'am, the paramedic replied, instructing her colleague to bag the cup and its contents. At the hospital, a toxicology screen revealed the truth. Judith's bloodstream contained a substantial dose of benzodiazepines, powerful sedatives that could cause dangerous respiratory depression, especially in combination with other medications or alcohol. Has Mrs. Lambert been prescribed any sedatives? The emergency physician asked, consulting the chart. Not that I am aware of, I answered truthfully. Andrew and Bethany remained suspiciously silent. Well, the levels in her system are consistent with deliberate ingestion, not accidental exposure, the doctor continued. Has she expressed any thoughts of self-harm? Absolutely not, I said firmly. In fact, she was discussing upcoming travel plans just this morning. The doctor looked troubled. The police will want to speak with all of you. This is potentially very serious. As he walked away, Andrew cornered me in the hallway, his expression frantic. Dad, you have to help us. This is all a misunderstanding. Is it? I asked quietly. Because from where I stand, it looks like you and Bethany put sedatives in my coffee, and only by chance did your mother-in-law drink it instead of me. That is insane, Andrew hissed, though his eyes darted nervously. Why would we do such a thing? Perhaps to have me declared incompetent? I suggested. A confused, sedated old man could easily be rushed to a neurological evaluation, especially if concerned family members had already been suggesting cognitive decline to friends, family, and doctors. The blood drained from Andrew's face as he realized how completely his plan had unraveled. Dad, please, you cannot think that we would. I know exactly what you would do, I interrupted coldly. The question now is what I will do about it. At that moment, a hospital security officer approached. Mr. Wilson, the police would like to speak with you and your family about the incident. Andrew's eyes widened in panic. Dad, please, he whispered desperately. Think about what this would do to the family. I looked at my son, this stranger who had been willing to drug his own father for money, and felt a profound sadness beneath my anger. You should have thought about that before you put sedatives in my coffee, Andrew. As I walked away to speak with the police, I heard Bethany sobbing in a nearby waiting area. Their perfect plan had backfired spectacularly, and now they would face the consequences of their actions. The money that was meant to provide comfort in my final years had nearly cost me my freedom, possibly even my life. Martha had been right to worry about how wealth changes people, though even she could not have imagined this betrayal from our own son. The morning after the coffee incident, I met with Thomas Harrington in his office, still shaken by how close I had come to being drugged by my own son. The police had taken statements from everyone present and were conducting a full investigation, with the coffee cup and its contents sent to a forensic laboratory for analysis. What you are describing is attempted elder abuse, possibly worse, Thomas said gravely after hearing my account. You need protection beyond just legal documents. He recommended hiring Franklin Graves, a former police detective who now worked as a private investigator specializing in elder abuse cases. Franklin arrived at our meeting within the hour, a solid, no-nonsense man with watchful eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings. Document everything, Franklin advised. Every conversation, every interaction, every unusual occurrence. We need to establish a pattern of behavior. Over the next week, Franklin systematically built a case. He interviewed the paramedics who had responded to the call at Andrew and Bethany House, obtained the hospital toxicology report confirming the presence of sedatives in Judith's system and the coffee cup, and installed discreet security cameras at my home. After Andrew was spotted attempting to enter through a back door, using a key I did not know existed. Most damning was the footage Franklin recovered from Andrew's own home security system, which had captured Bethany crushing pills into a fine powder in their kitchen before the breakfast, along with their conversation about ensuring I drank enough to be noticeably impaired. They planned to record your confused behavior, then rush you to a neurologist they had already contacted, Franklin explained, playing the audio. The doctor had been told you were experiencing rapid cognitive decline but refusing evaluation. I listened to my son and daughter-in-law plotting against me with methodical precision, feeling physically ill at the betrayal. "What happens now?" I asked when the recording ended. "That depends on what you want," Franklin replied. "We have enough evidence for criminal charges, but many families in your situation prefer to handle things privately." After careful consideration and consultation with Thomas, I decided to confront Andrew and Bethany with the evidence before making any decisions about pressing charges. Sarah had arrived from overseas by this point and insisted on being present for the confrontation. We arranged to meet at Thomas' office, neutral territory where security could ensure things remained civil. Andrew and Bethany arrived looking haggard and defensive, clearly surprised to see Sarah sitting beside me. "What is this about?" Andrew demanded as they took their seats across the conference table. "If you are planning to accuse us of something, we have our own lawyer. We are not in a legal proceeding," Thomas clarified. "This is a family meeting with evidence your father wanted to share with you before deciding how to proceed." Franklin played the security footage without preamble. The color drained from Bethany's face as she watched herself crushing pills and mixing them into coffee. Andrew's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish out of water. When the recording ended, the room fell silent. Finally, Bethany broke. "It was not supposed to hurt anyone," she sobbed. "We just needed you declared incompetent so Andrew could manage the estate. My mother was never supposed to drink that coffee. So drugging me without my knowledge was acceptable?" I asked quietly. "You left us no choice." Andrew burst out, his composure shattering. "We are drowning in debt. The business is failing, the house is underwater, and the credit cards are maxed out. That money could save everything we have built." "It was never your money to take," Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger. "That was Mom's legacy to Dad, not your personal bailout fund. What would you know about it?" Andrew sneered. "Playing savior in third world countries while we have been taking care of Dad and Mom for years. Is that what you call drugging his coffee? Taking care of him?" Sarah shot back. I raised a hand, silencing them both. "I want to understand something, Andrew. When did money become more important than family, than basic human decency?" Andrew looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "You do not understand the pressure we are under, the lifestyle expectations, the social commitments. We cannot just downsize without losing everything, including important business connections. So you were willing to have your own father declared incompetent, stripped of his rights and dignity, to maintain your lifestyle?" My voice remained steady, though inside I felt anything but calm. "It would have been better for everyone," Bethany insisted, dabbing at her tears with a monogrammed handkerchief. "You would have been taken care of, and we could have managed the estate properly." "By properly, you mean liquidating assets to pay off your debts?" Thomas asked pointedly. Neither Andrew nor Bethany answered, their silence confirmation enough. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Martha's absence acutely in this moment. What would she have wanted me to do? The answer came clearly, as if she were sitting beside me. "Protect yourself, but remember he is still your son." "Here is what happens now," I said firmly. "First, you will both seek professional help, financial counseling and therapy, at my expense. Second, you will write formal apologies to Judith, explaining exactly what happened and why. Third, you will come clean to everyone you have spoken to about my supposed cognitive decline." Andrew started to protest, but I continued. "If you comply with these conditions, I will not press criminal charges. However, I am filing for a restraining order, and I will be contacting the state licensing board regarding Andrew's financial practice." "You would ruin my career?" Andrew asked incredulously. "You were willing to have me declared mentally incompetent," I reminded him. "Actions have consequences, son." I turned to Thomas. "I also want to establish a trust for any future grandchildren, structured so neither Andrew nor Bethany can access the funds directly." Andrew and Bethany sat in stunned silence as the terms of my decision sank in. They had expected either blind forgiveness or harsh punishment, not this measured approach that offered a path forward while ensuring accountability. "One more thing," I added. "I am establishing a foundation in Martha's name focused on preventing elder abuse and financial exploitation. The first project will be an educational series about recognizing and responding to the signs of such abuse. I would like you both to contribute your time to this effort, to understand the harm your actions could have caused. After Andrew and Bethany departed, visibly shaken but without the handcuffs they might have faced, Sarah turned to me with tears in her eyes. How can you be so measured after what they tried to do? I sighed heavily. Because punishing them would not heal the damage. They need to understand the impact of their actions and make amends. That is the only way forward. The following days were difficult as we implemented the plan. Andrew and Bethany's initial resistance gave way to grudging compliance as they realized the alternative was criminal prosecution. I arranged a family meeting with extended relatives to clarify the situation and correct the misinformation Andrew had spread about my mental state. Most painful was the meeting with other family members. Andrew and Bethany had manipulated for money. My nephew Michael revealed they had borrowed $50,000 for a temporary business shortfall, while Martha's cousin had invested in a guaranteed return venture that never materialized. The web of financial deceit was more extensive than I had imagined. Sarah remained by my side through it all, her steady presence a reminder that not all family bonds had been corrupted by greed. We spent evenings sorting through Martha's possessions, sharing memories and gradually transforming grief into tender appreciation for the life we had shared. Mom knew, Sarah said one evening as we reviewed Martha's journals. She wrote about worrying that Andrew was counting on an inheritance he hadn't earned. She hoped the foundation would teach him that money should serve others, not just yourself. I nodded, running my fingers over Martha's neat handwriting. She always saw people clearly, even when it was painful. Including you, Sarah said softly. She knew exactly what you would need to navigate this mess without her. As we implemented security measures and legal protections, I found myself thinking often of the split-second decision to switch coffee cups that morning. Such a small action, with such profound consequences. Had I not noticed that strange smell, had I not acted on my instinct, I might now be in a very different situation, potentially declared incompetent and stripped of my autonomy, all because of money I had never sought or expected. The $31 million that had nearly destroyed my family now represented an opportunity to prevent similar tragedies for others. As Martha had intended, it would become a force for good rather than division, a legacy worthy of the remarkable woman who had built it so quietly over decades of disciplined work and visionary investment. 6 months after the coffee incident, life had settled into a new normal that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Andrew and Bethany had faced consequences for their actions, though not as severe as they might have. The district attorney had agreed not to pursue criminal charges in exchange for their cooperation in creating educational materials about elder financial abuse, their public acknowledgement serving as a more effective deterrent than a trial that might have ended with probation. Andrew's financial advisory license was suspended pending review, forcing him to reassess his career path. He and Bethany had finally faced their financial reality, selling their oversized home and luxury vehicles to reduce their crushing debt. They were living in a modest apartment while working with a court-appointed financial counselor to develop a sustainable budget based on their actual income rather than anticipated inheritance. The process had been humbling for them, but I saw glimmers of the sun I had raised emerging from beneath the veneer of status-seeking and materialism. During our monthly lunch meetings, supervised initially by Sarah at my insistence, Andrew had begun showing genuine remorse. I keep thinking about what Mom would say if she could see what I became, he admitted during our most recent meeting. She always valued integrity over appearances. Your mother believed in second chances, I told him. She would want you to learn from this, not be defined by it forever. Reconciliation would be a long journey, with trust rebuilt in small increments rather than grand gestures. I had established clear boundaries, including financial transparency requirements and regular family therapy sessions. Andrew and Bethany could earn back privileges like unsupervised visits and involvement in family gatherings through consistent accountability and changed behavior. Judith had recovered fully from her unwitting role in exposing the plot and had become an unlikely ally in my elder rights advocacy. Her first-hand experience with being drugged had transformed her from a passive observer to a passionate advocate for protecting vulnerable seniors. I never thought I would be grateful for being accidentally drugged, she remarked dryly at a foundation planning meeting, but it opened my eyes to what happens behind closed doors in too many families. The Martha Wilson Foundation for Elder Dignity had moved from concept to reality, with an initial focus on education and legal advocacy for seniors facing financial exploitation. Sarah had taken a position as program director, her international development experience proving invaluable in creating effective community interventions. My own healing journey had been neither straight nor simple. There were days when anger overwhelmed me, when the betrayal felt too enormous to process. My therapist, Dr. Elaine Carter, had helped me navigate these emotional storms without being consumed by them. Betrayal by family cuts deeper than any other, she observed during one particularly difficult session. You are mourning not just Martha, but also the son you thought you knew. Through grief support groups specifically for widowers, I had found companionship with men who understood the unique challenges of continuing life after losing a spouse. Harold, James, and Rupert had become close friends. Our weekly coffee meetings, a highlight I looked forward to. We discussed everything from the practicalities of learning to cook for one to the deeper questions of finding purpose in our remaining years. Martha's presence remained strong in my life, though in a different form. I felt her guidance when making decisions about the foundation, imagining her practical questions and insightful observations. The journals she had kept throughout our marriage revealed dimensions of her thinking I had never fully appreciated during our life together, particularly her concern about wealth-changing family dynamics. Money magnifies character, she had written. It doesn't change who people are. It reveals who they've always been beneath social constraints. This wisdom had proven prophetic. The inheritance had not transformed Andrew and Bethany into different people. It had simply revealed priorities and values that had been present but constrained by financial limitations. Similarly, it had not changed Sarah's fundamental compassion or my own desire for a meaningful rather than luxurious life. I had found a balance with the unexpected wealth, neither ascetic rejection nor indulgent embrace. I remained in our family home, finding comfort in familiar surroundings filled with memories, but had renovated the kitchen Martha had always wanted to update. I traveled occasionally, not to luxury resorts but to places Martha and I had dreamed of visiting together, carrying her memory with me to the ancient stones of Machu Picchu and the serene canals of Venice. The bulk of the estate remained in the conservative, diversified investments Martha had established, continuing to grow under the guidance of Eleanor Reynolds and her team. 20% had been designated for the foundation, ensuring its work would continue beyond my lifetime. Trusts had been established for potential grandchildren, structured to support education and entrepreneurship rather than consumption. Sarah had permanently relocated from overseas, buying a small house 15 minutes from mine. Our bond had deepened through the crisis, weekly dinner gatherings becoming a cherished routine. She had begun dating Michael, a kind-hearted architectural historian she had met through the foundation, and I enjoyed seeing her build a life that balanced purpose with personal happiness. As for Andrew and Bethany, their path to redemption would be long and entirely of their own making. The foundation had created entry-level positions for them when they completed their financial counseling program, offering a chance to contribute meaningfully while rebuilding their understanding of ethical wealth management. Whether they would truly change or simply comply with requirements to avoid consequences remained to be seen. One evening, sitting on my back porch watching the sunset, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. I had lost my beloved wife, discovered unexpected wealth, faced betrayal from my son, narrowly avoided being drugged, and found new purpose through it all. The coffee cup switch that had exposed the plot seemed almost trivial in isolation, yet it had been the pivotal moment that changed everything. The true wealth in my life, I realized, had never been the $31 million. It was the wisdom Martha had cultivated and shared over our 45 years together. It was Sarah's unwavering support and integrity. It was the new friends who accepted me as I was, not for what I could provide. It was even the painful clarity about Andrew's character that, while heartbreaking, had prevented potentially worse harm. Martha's final gift had not been the money at all, but the chance to see clearly and choose wisely in her absence. By trusting me with her financial legacy, She had forced me to grow beyond the comfortable partnership we had shared into a stronger, more discerning individual, capable of navigating complex human motivations. The true lesson was not about money management or even family betrayal, but about the power of clear-sighted love. Martha had seen me more clearly than I saw myself, recognizing strengths I had not fully claimed. Her faith in me had become my faith in myself, allowing me to handle challenges I would never have believed possible. What saved me was not just switching those coffee cups, but remembering what Martha always said: true wealth isn't in your bank account, but in recognizing poison before you drink it, whether it is in a cup or disguised as love. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to greater wisdom? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the greatest gift is not the inheritance itself, but the strength to protect it from those who would misuse it. Thank you for listening. And remember, the wealth that matters most can never be measured in dollars.